So I'm a designer, and it's quite a pleasure to talk about the future, because obviously as a designer, in this day, the future comes at us very, very fast, right? We are very lucky as creative people to be working at a time like this, because the future becomes today just so very fast. When I was growing up, these images were how we thought about the future, and it really was about infrastructure and about change that would happen at a great sociological level. But there was also something else happening in my childhood. It was this: the computer was becoming an important part of life. At the time it was very rough, but since then it's grown to be part of everyday life. It's an intimate part of our lives. And it's clear this thing, this machine, this invention is driving what really will become our future. So it's fun to talk about. This thing is driving sometimes deep, deep, radical political change overnight. And of course it's becoming very much, as Steve Mann talked about, something we wear. It's also advancing to the point where it's taking all kinds of different shapes. So this idea of what a computer is and how it drives society and drives us as people is becoming a little harder to talk about, maybe a little more interesting to talk about. Even this is a modern idea of what a computer is becoming. And these things are showing up everywhere. But at the same time, we have not yet figured out how to sort of cope with this as a society. And so these sort of things happen.
Really?
All right. Yeah, so we're trying to figure out how does computing fit into our lives. That's a good example. We maybe see ourselves doing a whole lot of babysitting of these machines. That can't be sustainable, right? We need to design our way out of this. One of the phenomena that fascinates me the most is this simple idea of the map outgrowing the territory. We invented these machines. We invented lots of affordances in life, books and things, to encode a level of abstraction about what we otherwise experience in life. The idea of a map is an abstract version of a territory we might need to walk or drive. Well, that same idea helps inform us about a phenomenon in real life. The map, the identity of a person, the physical experience, the central experience of knowing them, is in a lot of ways competing with, the territory, the map of a person, the sort of abstraction of them, the encoded version of them, where they get to tell their story. And in a sort of humorous way, we're getting a bit of a disconnect sometimes, right? We're not even sure which one may be more important to us, more real. I'm sure you know about lots of people, you engage lots of people that you don't necessarily engage in first person. You don't talk to them very much as real people. Instead, they're good friends. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, but it's a fantastic sign of what this advance of computing is doing to the shape of our interactions and the shape of society in general. And it makes me wonder, okay, what happens next? We still portray this idea of computing in this fantastical way, right? So when we try and think of the future, we still think of it like we think of science fiction. Wondrous examples of computing allowing us to do things we couldn't do by ourselves. But another version of it, which actually I think marks today's activity, the sort of the phenomena going on right now, is much simpler. It's what happens, or the technology that gets turned into these little trivial inventions that fill catalogs like SkyMall. You're familiar with SkyMall? It's that catalog you might read on an airplane when you're bored. This is happening because technology that was once very expensive and difficult to produce is becoming so cheap that we can turn it into simple little conveniences. And it's allowing us to close a lot of the small gaps in life, to drive comfort or closeness. Things like door locks. And in this case, a young student made a sensor just to alert him when he forgot to zip up his zipper. Just a good, maybe funny example of technology being used in places we would have never imagined had we just relied on science fiction, because it became so cheap and so easy. And it hopefully helps you open your mind. So, to talk about what I think, where some of these things are going, brought you what I call a few artifacts from the future, a few ideas where I think things might evolve. Obviously, we have heard and talked a lot about wearable computing, but I'm a very strong believer that wearable is not about bringing technology to our body, but making our body instead a part of a network. At Frog, we worked for years on a project for Disney called the Magic Band. And in that, the park is the computer, this sort of all-knowing environment that tries to figure out where is everybody and how can we optimize the experience. And everybody who wears the wristband becomes part of that computer. Therefore, it's able to act on our behalf. Very different experience than what the Apple Watch or other technologies are trying to portray. And I think a much more powerful experience. Wearable computing can also mean a means to augment our physical body, not simply bring information to it, like a tiny smartphone. A computer with the recorded or the optimized idea of hand movement could, using gyroscopic counterbalancing, create an agility that you're not otherwise born with. Perhaps even imbue you with style in your hand movement that you don't otherwise have. Maybe create an agility in your body movement using musculature. It could enhance our senses. Sound cancellation and microphone placement could allow us to listen to only exactly what we wanted to listen to in a crowded space. These are things that go beyond the simple idea of being able to see my incoming emails on my wrist. Another thing I'm very fascinated with, and we've spent a lot of time exploring, is this idea of room-scale computing. This is not augmented reality so much as taking the notions of augmentation and placing them in the room so that I can remain a naturalistic, engaged human, not wearing machines. And so the key part of that concept is what we call smart dumb things. And this is simple idea of taking all of the dumb things in the world. This is a smart thing, and this is a dumb thing. And there are many, many more of these. And they're a lot easier to manage, and they're a lot cheaper. And therefore, if we could do something with them, it'd be a lot more practical to become part of this future idea of computing. So one place we can learn from is what's happening in software development. This is a piece of code written by some friends of mine in a company in San Francisco that allows you to take, the company's called Kimono Labs. These guys allow you to take a website and scrape all of the individual information that you like and turn it into an application. So let's say you have a recurring bus schedule on a website that you like. You could turn that into your own little personal bus schedule application. You may not need it, but you can do that. Well, the really beautiful part about it, that becomes quite magical, is when you do that in real life. You integrate this idea into the bus's actual movement and turning that into a piece of data that the computer can use. Another simple idea is using centralized computing resources, like a computer site in the middle of the room that can see the room and allow us to place arbitrary objects in the room and have those become part of a computing environment. So this is a quick technical demo we created in our studio. It's just a very simple idea where anything can become part of a technical environment. This is another simple idea. So maybe those aren't the best ways to use the affordances, but it's up to you. So we wanted to demonstrate maybe this possibility in a more creative way, so we made a nice little video about it, and we called it Smart Dumb Things. Okay, so that's a quick picture from me about how I believe the interface essentially evolves to become part of our environment, less about carrying around little small computers. But okay, let's say that all happens. What are we going to do with this? Even then, this evolution from dedicated machines to this environment that's full of these experiences, full of these machines, needs support. This environment invites another answer. Today, all of our computing experiences are fairly flat. Even the most beautiful ones are still fairly flat, benign data. I mean, the computer's moving a lot of information. My tweet to you, a tweet to the world, those sort of things. But in terms of actually helping us and articulating answers and sifting and working through information, they're still pretty dumb. But that's changing very quickly. And to me, this is actually the most exciting space in computing and software design. So as a designer, to me, this is going to be the most impactful part of the next few years, I'm sure. And it's not, when I say cognitive systems, I'm not necessarily talking about artificial intelligence in the way that it's currently talked about. When we think of AI, we often think of these kinds of things, the machines that talk and think and are sentient. If you've seen any movies lately, it seems almost half of them, the bad guy is a machine that goes bad. I'm talking more about the practical sciences that are growing up very quickly with things like Watson or what Google Now hopes to become. Google Now is a good example because it's a very simple expression of this idea, but it's dealing with, right now so far, very simple data sets. So if you look at this, maybe it exists on a spectrum. There's still a lot of words being thrown around, so just for today, let's look at it this way. There's simple, dumb things. There's the word smart that's used for just about everything. When you put a computer in it, we call it smart. All the way up to this idea of personal assistance. I'm talking about something smarter than that. This system is made up of a set of layers that are important to making it work right. First of all, the applications that can deal with our engagement through natural language. And that way we're not having to use screens everywhere. The key is, of course, in the middle, this logic engine. This engine that is a new type of technology that's able to parse through lots of data in a particular way, and I'll get to that. But the other factor that's driving this is this massive availability of structured data and what we call dark data. And dark data is today just all of the wild information that's unstructured, like tweets, emails, photographs. All of this data is out there, and there's very few ways to actually use it other than to just read it as another human being. But that's changing, and that's what's radically changing the proposition. To just give you a comparative example, do you guys remember before the social media explosion, before the just sheer volume of means of communications, the sheer volume of commentary about life, the map overtaking the territory? This is only a very recent phenomenon. By the look of everyone here and their age, even the youngest of us know that that day was only recently. I remember growing up in the 90s and the idea of a media explosion, we were talking about too many channels on TV. But this, of course, this phenomena just swamps that. I want you to think of that and correlate that to what I believe is going to happen with something that we call basic decision support. It may be a boring name, but I'll try and make it exciting for you. Decision support today is happening in very simple ways that sometimes it's too easy to forget about. Things like your car makes millions of decisions every second. Every time you go shopping online, there are lots of decision support, navigation, movies and music. All of these things are helping us make decisions. But they're getting to the point where we can actually support a human being and make a decision in ways that are hard to imagine today unless you're part of this phenomenon. So just for an example, imagine you're a physician and you manage hundreds of patients and they have various issues like asthma. And just today, pollen.com, a website, just tweets that the pollen count will go up, okay? Now, the system that is keeping track on Twitter picks this information up because it's able to decipher plain language. And it makes sense out of that idea that the pollen count will go up. So it now turns it into an important bit of information that it's going to use. That software then combs through massive databases of patients. And it identifies the patients who not only have asthma issues, but maybe have been to the emergency room recently. Patients that have a history of not complying with their medicine. In other words, they forget to get a prescription or things like that. And it alerts the doctor. So out of hundreds of possible patients, this computer comes back and says, hey, there's 4 or 5 people you need to call. So simply by contacting those 4 or 5 people out of hundreds, we avoid many trips to the emergency room, which are dangerous and costly. That's the kind of decision support that we can come to expect. Or just take a consumer idea, something you cannot do today yet. The idea of saying to a computer, on the way to my brother's house, I need to pick up some cheap wine that goes well with lasagna. That experience, that idea, only another human can deal with that. But there's a company in California, the guys who founded Siri, called Viv, that is actually building an app store. Just to make it simple sounding, they're building essentially an app store that processes natural language and routes it to all of the particular services, navigation, wine recommendations, retail locations, all of that, and processes that into a single answer that can deliver back. Oh, sorry. Okay, are you guys familiar with the uncanny valley? That idea? We've all, obviously, if you're in design, if you're in technology, you've probably heard of this idea, that sort of creepiness when a computer tries to simulate being a human. It's off-putting, right? It takes a lot of energy to create something that simulates a human. We're starting to experience this phenomena not just in visual simulations, like when we make robots look too human, but when we experience a computer think. So that's a car driving for us. And that phenomena is only going to increase. And so what I would encourage you is to start to think of your interactions or the future state of our design of machines, these computing machines, not like advanced notions of the toaster, but instead machines that are more like engaging another creature. And I didn't put a picture of a person there because we're not yet to that level. But we will need to begin to understand them not as another machine from which you interact with in an explicit manner, but a machine that you interact with almost in a very personal manner, even if it's not quite up to what we call true human intelligence. Current machines are very deterministic. They have no context, fixed structures. What I'm talking about are systems that deal with probabilities, with natural language, and they learn. They learn, and they solve, and they evolve. We're dealing with machines like that just now, today. I work with a company, one of my clients is called Cognitive Scale. And I've come to realize that this is the future. We're dealing with machines that support inference, the simple idea of inference. They're able to infer ideas as opposed to being told that is red or that is this wide. They're able to figure that out. They're able to make assumptions, plan under uncertainty, adapt to context, and learn over time. So this idea of decision support, just like the media explosion, what I want to try and tell you is I believe the future means the idea of making a decision may come to the point where we make almost no decisions without the assistance of a computer, without a computer next to us telling us everything we eat, everywhere we go, everyone we engage with. There will at least be the opportunity to get a deep, quantified projection of the future. And it will be special to try and make a decision without that assistance. I know that sounds radical, but if I would have told you in the 1990s that every minute of the day people would be commenting on what they ate or being able to read instant feedback. I mean, I just got tweets as I was standing here, so I wouldn't have believed that 20 years ago. I believe this will be the truth. And we may grow to come to see this idea of cognitive dependence, where we feel almost crippled to not check the computer for its prediction of how that will work. Maybe we'll never eat something until we see, well, okay, it's going to raise my calorie count by this much, and I'll make a decision whether that's worth it or not. Ray Kurzweil believes our brains will connect directly to the cloud, and the idea of thinking will be a hybrid of biological and non-biological thinking. This is what I'm talking about. And I'm not so afraid of this in the idea of computing attacking us in some overwhelming way that science fiction constantly portrays. But I am afraid of other things. I'm afraid of instead a million tiny white lies that these machines are trained to tell us, because humans are essentially on the other end of that loop. And that's, I think, what we have to design around. Not so much nuclear Armageddon. And this all rolls up into this idea I call shapelessness, that all of our interactions with the world, the physical things that we've created a vocabulary around, is changing. And the things that we refer to in terms of machines are these tools. But instead, our interaction with computing is shifting to this. Not religion so much, but an idea of symbology. Our design, our thinking around that has to be driven instead by much more the idea of faith and symbology, as opposed to just more and more tools. Because we're dealing with a world that's far less of what we see and touch, and much more of what we can perceive and imagine. So, this is my conclusion. We still have to keep in mind the promise of this technology should be still to create a better life and enhance our humanity. I'm going to leave you with one last clip. What's your favorite thing to eat for dinner?
Spaghetti and meatballs.
Oh yeah? What do we have tonight?
I don't know.
Would you like ice cream?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Technology can enhance us.
Potenziare e migliorare.
Is this working? Yeah. We have a few minutes, and I'm sure after seeing all this, there's some questions. So is there anyone in the audience with some questions for Mark about this, this vision of the future that he's visualized so well for us? Someone out there. C'è qualcuno che vuole fare una domanda? Sì.
Il rapporto tra questo decision support,
The relationship between decision support and our emotional memory allows us to react in real time, and to what extent can this work in terms of the emotional experience that we've gained?
About our memory of experiences, and I guess in Italian it's memoria affettiva, which I'm not sure how to translate, but affective memory of the experiences that we inhabit. How do you see that integrating into the into the products of the future?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think today we're already testing our will around that. We live not only in the present, but in a constant state of reflection. Right? Every time we tweet about something we just heard, we're looking backwards. We're counting the past constantly and building this library in real time. And so we've already started that process. And I think it does challenge, it shrinks the availability of the future because of this mountain of the past that we have to constantly look back at. And so we're taking pieces of time to look at the past some more and more. And while that helps us, I think, to a degree, we're still exploring what that line is. You know, I think society will arrive at some percentage that's acceptable to sort of look back in the past. And part of that will help us is right now you have to sort of wade through a mountain of recordings of the past, unfiltered, right? You subscribe to certain people on Twitter, and so you'll see their information. But what if instead, out of the entire world's commentary, a computer could pick out just the most interesting, delightful things, the things you should know? I think that will reduce the amount of time we're looking backwards to make life a little bit easier.
Another question. Is there someone else who has a burning question? Because over there. Yes, the lady's over there.
Se il futuro della tecnologia è quello di aumentare la nostra
If future of
umanità,
technology is to enhance our ability, our humanity, I want to know why in research teams, technology teams developing robots and interfaces, why artists and creative people are not there. And I mean poets, visual artists, musicians, authors. They are those who can disseminate awareness of mankind, and they're also able to reason by short circuits and intuition. I've spoken to high-cab teams. No artist whatsoever is ever present in those teams.
So the question is, what of the artists when all of these technologies are being developed? What is the role of the poet, the musician, the painter? How come they're not there in the middle? They have such intuition, and they can short circuit, and they can create a more humane and holistic vision. Where are they in this process?
I love that question. Look, when these questions arise about where humanity goes with this, the first thing I think about is horses. And I know that sounds strange, but if you look back 100 years, before the automobile became common, horses were these poor, abused animals. We rode them all day long, and the cities were full of them, and cities stank terribly because horse shit. And we turned horses from tools into lovely things that we could enjoy and respect. And I think about all of these tools, we will find space to enjoy them in a similar way. When instead of having to figure out how to make them work for us, we can instead imbue them with humanity and enjoy them in creative ways. I'm never afraid that humanity will choose a suboptimal answer. In other words, in the way that computing looks at things as optimizations, we will always choose suboptimal things for the opportunity of beauty and just personal passion. So I expect that to continue to be the case.
And Mark, just one last thing. When do you think that credit card payment's going to happen? Like, you saw that it took 30 years for the Google Glass. When do you think your next product is going to really hit the mass market?
We just shipped a smart home product, and that's the funny thing is it feels very early to the smart home. While it's technically feasible, it's one of those issues of trying to get it adopted in an infrastructure. Computing is easy when you can put the whole promise into a box and ship it on a shelf and have people just go and pick it up, and it's all there. There are a lot of products that our future is made of that require infrastructure. The automobile, self-driving cars will have to overcome 100 years of older cars coexisting, 100 years of automotive policy and infrastructure. Well, the smart home is an example of a product we're trying to get into the market. It's trying to overcome 1,000 years of home building and habits. And I do believe it will make things beautiful and more enjoyable and easier, but it's not nearly as simple as shipping something like a phone.
That's so true. Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much. And now I hand it back to Maria Grazia.
Grazie Luigi, grazie tante Mark.